Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the recently redesigned 2025 Ford Ranger. But more specifically, this is an XL trim level, so it's about the cheapest Ford Ranger that you can currently buy, and one of the cheapest mid-sized trucks, period. This one is in the paint color that Ford likes to call beige, and although beige is often associated with older vehicles and boring vehicles, I can tell you straight up that this Ford Ranger is anything but that. But while it's one of the best mid-sized trucks you can currently buy, especially in the XL cheapest trim level, it's not perfect. So today I get to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Ford Ranger to help you guys at home decide if it might be the right mid-sized truck for you, or if you should leave it at the lot and look at the other competition. So today you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to Goody Motor Ford for letting me borrow this one for the day. They're one of the best dealerships in the nation. They sell below MSRP and they ship all over the country. And with that said, let's dive right into this review. And thank you so much for watching car videos on the YouTube. But if you get anything out of this video today, or you like the Ford Ranger, please consider liking my video. Basically, that lets me know to make more stuff like this. It helps my video get shared, and it'll help you as well by having the YouTube choose to show you more stuff like this. Thank you so much. But if you're new to Ford, or the Ford Ranger, there's a few things that you should probably know. Ford is actually one of the last all-American automakers that haven't sold out to other countries or other companies, and I think that's pretty cool that they've been self-sufficient for so long. They were founded by Henry Ford in Detroit, Michigan back in 1903, but it wasn't until 1983 that the very first Ford Ranger rolled off the assembly line. Back then in the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s, the first three generations of Ford Ranger were all compact or mini trucks. They were mostly regular cabs with a 6-foot bed, although some of them were extended cabs, but they were meant for work. They were meant for hauling stuff like hay, hauling furniture, or anything else you could load them down with. But then Ford, after selling several 100,000 of them a year, at least some of those years, they really sold well, and then Ford decided to take a hiatus from them for a few years. They brought back the Ranger in 2019 for the 4th generation, and it really wasn't quite the hit that they left when they discarded the 3rd generation Ranger. And now for the 5th generation that started last year for 2024, they really haven't gotten the start that Ford, I think, was hoping for. For 2024, they only sold about 46,000 of these, and while they still haul at least a lot of butts and butt between the 4 doors and the powerful turbocharged engines, they're not exactly the Ford Rangers that Ford started back in the 80s, but they're still pretty darn cool. And this one being an XL, that starts at about $33,000 after you add 4-wheel drive. It's about a $38,000 vehicle with the extra options this has. It actually feels like a very good bargain, a very substantial vehicle, and probably a lot like those earlier generation Ford Rangers used to feel like back in the day. But if you do want more power, you're welcome to get a twin-turbo V6, either the 2.7-liter EcoBoost, or if you spend almost $60,000, you could even get a Ford Ranger Raptor. So there's a lot of variations. There's a lot that Ford offers between their 4 different trim levels of the new Ford Ranger. And for being a modern midsize truck, these are actually pretty pleasant to drive, and they park surprisingly well in this average size parking spot. That's because they're about 17.5 feet long. The wheelbase is roughly 10.5 feet, so it is pretty planted and stable on the road, especially where if you count the side mirrors, these are around 6.5 feet wide and about 6.1 feet tall, and then they weigh anywhere from about 43 to 5,500 pounds, basically just depending on if you have an XL 2-wheel drive all the way up to the heavy Ford Ranger Raptor with 4-wheel drive. There's a lot of variation between them, but this one being a lower weight trim level, it actually has a really high payload of over 1,600 pounds, which is absolutely impressive for a mid-sized truck. And then depending on how they're spec'd, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, and which engine, they can tow between 5,500 and 7,500 pounds. And then this one does have about 9.3 inches of ground clearance, a 373 final drive ratio, and it can do a full circle in about 42 feet. And then the last couple things to mention out here is the gas door is located on the driver's side. It is an 18.5 gallon tank, but when you lock the vehicle, the gas door doesn't lock, so the bumps might try to siphon some of your 87 or higher octane fuel. The way this base model with 4-wheel drive is rated, it actually is expected to get 19 in the city, 26 on the highway, which is fantastic for a 4x4 midsize truck. That means your max road trip and range could be as good as about 488 miles. And then it comes with a Goodyear Wrangler Territory all-terrain tire with a 255/70/17 rating, and the tread is actually pretty decent at about 10/30 seconds. And then this is your key. I like that the base model still has the switchblade style key, and it's not all proximity key features if you don't want that. And then you have unlock, lock, and panic button, but you can leave that in your pocket because you do have the Ford key code right there to get into your Ford Ranger. The driver's side door panel of the Ford Ranger actually feels pretty substantial. It's all black materials, nothing overly fancy, but it's going to be something that you could basically just hose down. It's all black, plastic, polymer type of stuff. And it's fairly comfortable. The armrest is okay. It's kind of squishy. You do have this cool handle, which I actually really like for getting in and out. And then your basic controls. You have a basic speaker. It sounds reasonable, basically what you would expect for a lower trim level. And then 2 bottle snack pocket type of storage. This one does have a running board, which you probably need because otherwise the floor of the vehicle is probably about 2 feet off the ground. There's not really anything to greet you on the door sill on this XL trim level, but you do have a nice cloth mat, rubberized pedals, even a dead pedal, and then you have the hood release there. Unfortunately, there is no knee airbag, as this is only a 4-star overall crash test rated vehicle. And then you have your lighting options, ventilation, turn signals, a tiny bit of hidden storage right there, tilting and telescoping wheel, and it's just a polymer synthetic type of material. It's not leather wrapped, it's not heated or anything like that. And then you have your manual cloth seat, which I actually think it has decent bolstering, and it was very comfortable in my time with it so far today. And then nothing else up top. Sitting inside the Ford Ranger is actually pretty pleasant. It's really ergonomically well designed. The windows are large, the front visibility is fantastic, the hood slopes down a little bit. Like most trucks, you still can't see anything on the ground within about 15 feet, but it is better visibility and a better layout than some of the other mid-sized trucks of the current generation. With the manual key, you can fire it up. You still have 2 big screens for the instrument cluster and the infotainment screen, the horn. It's actually really loud. It sounds like it comes straight from the F-150. And then you have your basic voice and volume controls and cruise control on the left, and all of your controls that go through the center display on the right, but nothing that we're going to get too far into today. Those are really kind of the options you should feel out for yourself in person when you visit the dealer. And then big screen here, still have physical climate controls, which I like, although the dials are pretty small in comparison to everything else. And then you have a couple plugins, non-wireless charger on this one, rubberized, the backup camera. The trajectory lines do move. The clarity is okay. It's not fantastic, but it is certainly good enough. And then you have an electronic parking brake, your mode select, auto start stop, traction control, your 4x4 options, and this has a low gear, which is nice because it's a 4x4 system. And then a 12-volt outside storage there. You also have a sunglass holder. And are these LED? Ooh, they are LED. Does this slide? This does slide, but there's no vanity mirror because when you're doing truck stuff, you shouldn't be checking yourself out. At least that's Ford's logic. Anyways, I'm going to turn this off and hop in the back. The back of the Ford Ranger is actually one of the more impressive mid-sized trucks for the most part. Visibility is good, the window is large, the door panel is all the same black synthetic type of materials that are going to age well, not really show a lot of dirt and debris, and if they do, you can easily wash them down without feeling too bad about it. And then the seat is pretty high up. I'm 5'11". This is probably at the top of my pelvic crest, so it is pretty high up there. Thankfully, the running board does extend, and you can drop the seat backrest by pulling the handle, the lever, whatever you want to call it, the loop right there. You can also lift them up by pulling here, and you have some tire changing tools, and you have some extra storage bins down there. And then you have the child safety anchors at every location, so that's really good. But there is no B-pillar handle, unfortunately, so you might have to use the swinging door, which is not the safest thing, but we still made it. At 5'11", I have pretty good room in front of my knees. No vents or anything, but I do have a 12-volt and some storage, and I even have a full-down armrest with some tiny little kitty cone cup holders. You can see by the Maroni sticker on the back window that the glass is actually pretty big, and you do have good visibility in the back of the Ford Ranger. And at 5'11", pretty good headroom too. I could actually be pretty comfortable back here for a while. I just wish I had ventilation, and I think kids or older adults are probably going to appreciate if Ford changes that in the future. The back of the Ford Ranger actually looks really good, but if this was my truck, I've got some black vinyl lettering to fill in Ranger. But overall, it looks very clean, it looks very simple, and I really like this a lot. The tailgate does not lock, but it does dampen, which is nice. It's already bed lined. And then this is about a 60-foot bed. At the widest point, it's about 62.5 inches, or between the wheel wells, it's about 48 inches or 4 feet. It's roughly 21 inches tall. So the overall cubic volume of this area is roughly 43 feet, which is actually pretty decent. And then you'll notice you basically have a tie down at every corner, kind of. kind of one at the corners, middle. They're kind of staggered a little bit in their positioning. But overall, this looks like a very useful bed, and I like that Ford is stamped in the back. I just wish that it had a sliding rear window like trucks used to have. And then the tailgate is also pretty easy to lift and lock. The side profile of this looks really nice too, and I'm glad that Ford didn't add any chrome or any weird accents to it. It's basically just the beige or the black. And honestly, the black accents, the black handles, the caps, the SXT package side vent cover, they actually look pretty good. Door panel again opens up nice. You're not really missing anything that the driver's side had because again, this is all manual controls. I do wish though that there was transmission tunnel storage and even more above the glove box, but at least we do have that, and at least that is locking with the real key they use for the ignition. It's fairly small, but overall this vehicle has enough storage throughout it. And with that said, let's come around to the front. I'm going to pop the hood and I'm going to show you the gem that powers this Ford Ranger. Under the hood of this XL Ford Ranger is the smallest and the least powerful engine you can get. But despite all that, it's actually very impressive and quite competitive to the competition, even in this base form. It's a 2.3 liter EcoBoost engine. It makes about 270 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 310 pound-feet of torque at 3,000 RPM. It's pretty similar to the EcoBoost Mustang engine, which is pretty neat. But if we look under the hood, you'll notice that the air boxes are right here, the reservoir's on the side, the battery, the fuse box. And then if we actually look at the engine, there is so much room to work on this. It's actually pretty substantial. So the air comes in through here, through the filter. It goes through the turbo that you could easily modify, access right there on the passenger side. And then it goes through the exhaust, comes back up through the intake piping, and it goes into the intake side right there. You can see the block, the valve cover, the head, all the stuff, the accessory belt. There's so much room on the front of this engine and all around it to work on it. It is a very good engine, not only because it's powerful and it's pretty quick, as you'll see in just a minute, but this is one of the most straightforward and easiest engines to work on, based off of how it looks and my initial impressions. With that said, let's drop the hood and take it for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the 2025 Ford Ranger XL. Let's get up to speed. Partial throttle. This 2.3 liter EcoBoost engine seriously does such a good job, especially in my area where we're basically a mile above sea level. The brakes, half brake pedal. Yeah, there's a little bit more nosedive than the Ford Maverick I just hopped out of. Handles corners surprisingly good for a truck. Riding out this gear. There's some rev hang. I don't like rev hang, and we are in sport mode, or at least we were before I turned off the vehicle. Let's see if we are still... No, I think we reverted back to normal mode. So now we're in sport mode. I'll see if there's still rev hang. But anyways, for a tall, fairly lightweight mid-sized truck, because this doesn't have a lot of options and it has the smallest possible engine in this configuration, it actually handles really well. There's not as much body roll as I was expecting, or as much as I even remember from a year ago when I drove one of these. And compared to a lot of the full-size trucks I've driven, this really feels like a joy to drive. The hood slopes down, the windshield is big, so you have really good forward-facing visibility. You have great visibility through the rear view mirror on this one, and this is a truck that you probably don't even need a digital rear view mirror for. And then the side mirrors are huge. Those are probably twice as big as the Chevy Colorado GMC Canyon side mirrors. You can actually see what's going on with those, which is fantastic. But even if you just turn your head, the visibility is still really good up until the C-pillar, which that's what the side mirrors are for. And then the brakes again do a really good job to slow you down. Coming around a corner in two-wheel drive, a little bit of wheel spin, right back up to speed. I do, of course, wish you could hear the turbo spooling, but honestly, the engine actually sounds pretty good for being an EcoBoost engine. And then the overall layout of this vehicle is nice. Everything's where you want it to be. You have cup holders, you have decent amounts of storage, center console. It doesn't feel like your passenger is that far away from you, and where these are only mid-sized trucks, they're not overly wide, so you really feel close to your passenger, but you have good headroom. At 5'11", I fit really comfortably in here, and the driving position is really nice. I especially like that the belt line of the vehicle is not as tall as some other trucks feel like, especially the Tacoma. This feels like I have really great visibility, and honestly, even though there's a tiny bit of wind and road noise, it is very windy outside, as evident by the American flag. But overall, this is a fun truck to drive, especially in this lower trim level, and I like it a lot. But with that said, let me get to the private road and I'll show you how fast this thing is, 0 to 60. 0 to 60 in the 2025 Ford Ranger with the 4-cylinder turbo EcoBoost engine. 4-wheel drive is on, sport mode is on, traction control is off, and I'm gonna do a brake rev. But keep in mind, density altitude is 4,800 feet, so we're basically a mile above sea level, meaning this vehicle, even though it's turboed, it is still down on power, probably 7 or 8%. Anyways, let's see what it can do. Very hard launch. First gear was actually quite impressive, and true 0 to 60 came in at 6.67 seconds. Not bad for a work truck. My final thoughts of the 2025 Ford Ranger XL with the smaller EcoBoost engine. I'll be quite honest, I actually like it a lot, and I was pleasantly surprised with how good this vehicle is, especially for only being about $37,000, which ain't cheap, but in today's market, this is actually a pretty reasonable deal for a full-size mid-size truck, 4x4. That's bedlined. That's pretty quick, doing a 6-second 0 to 60. It even has LED headlights, a number of safety features, even though overall the integrity of it only holds up to about a 4-star rating. But it's a very usable work truck for being a mid-size truck anyways, a modern mid-size truck. I, of course, always recommend you test drive the competition, so see the Frontier, the Tacoma, the Ridgeline, all of those things. But this honestly surprised me with how good it is. For about 38 grand, 37 grand, whatever it is, it's a really good value, and it drives well. It handles well. It doesn't feel really trucky. It feels like a reasonable vehicle that you could daily drive, especially if you're getting 26 mpg and have about 500 miles of range on less than a 20-gallon tank. This is a very practical vehicle, and I'm very glad that it exists, and I'm glad that I got to drive the base model today. But ultimately, what matters is your thoughts and your opinions. Have you owned any of the 5 generations of Ford Ranger? Comment below. Or if you're interested in one of these, comment below and let me know what you're thinking. I'd love to connect with you guys down below. And if you got anything out of this video today, please consider liking it. Again, comment those thoughts, subscribe, and check out the Goody Motor Ford group. They are seriously an awesome group of people, and I'll link them below if you're interested. With that said, take care, guys. See ya.